When I stepped out of the taxi that morning, I had no idea my entire world was about to shatter into pieces I might never put back together. The week away visiting my sister had been peaceful, restful even. I'd needed it after months of feeling like a stranger in my own home, tiptoeing around my daughter-in-law's moods, trying not to be a burden. But as the taxi pulled away and I stood on the sidewalk with my small overnight bag, something felt wrong. Terribly, horribly wrong. My furniture was on the lawn. Not just a piece or two, everything. My late husband's favorite reading chair, the one with the worn armrest where he'd rest his coffee cup every Sunday morning, the framed photos of our wedding day, our son's childhood, 40 years of memories scattered across the grass like garbage, his tools, the ones he'd organized so carefully in the garage, thrown in a heap by the mailbox. My hands went numb. The bag slipped from my fingers onto the sidewalk. A car I didn't recognize sat in my driveway, a sleek black sedan that definitely wasn't David's truck. The curtains in the front window were drawn tight, new curtains I'd never seen before. My legs felt like water as I walked up the path I'd walked thousands of times, the same path where I'd taught David to ride his bike, where I'd waited for my husband to come home from work, where I'd swept leaves every autumn for 4 decades. I reached for the doorknob, locked. My key wouldn't even slide into the mechanism. They'd changed the locks on my house, my home. I rang the doorbell with a trembling finger, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. The door opened just a crack, and Melissa's face appeared in the gap. My daughter, but her expression wasn't the polite smile she usually wore around me. This was something else entirely. Triumph. Cold, calculating triumph. "You can't stay here anymore," she said, her voice flat and final. No greeting, no explanation. Just those words, delivered like a verdict. But I couldn't process what I was hearing. "Melissa, this is my house. I just went to visit Janet for a week. What's happening?" "This house is ours now," she said, and the smile that spread across her face made my stomach turn. "You signed the transfer papers before your trip. Don't you remember?" The world tilted. Transfer papers. I'd never signed anything like that. I'd signed some documents for David months ago, business forms he said he needed help with, but nothing about the house, nothing about transferring ownership. This was the home my husband and I had bought when we were newlyweds, the home where we'd raised our son, the home I'd lived in for 40 years. "I never signed away my house," I said, my voice rising despite my attempt to stay calm. "Melissa, there's been a mistake. Please, let me in so we can sort this out." "There's no mistake, Margaret." She'd never called me by my first name before. It had always been Mom, or at least Mrs. Thompson. "The house is legally ours now. You need to leave, or I'll call the police for trespassing." "Trespassing? This is my home." The words came out as a sob. "I raised my son here. My husband died in the bedroom upstairs. You can't just—" The door clicked shut in my face. I heard the deadbolt slide into place, that new lock keeping me out of my own life. I stood there, frozen, unable to move or think or breathe properly. How had this happened? How had I gone from having a home, a family, a life, to standing locked out like a stranger in the span of 7 days? I thought back to the week before I'd left, trying to remember any signs I'd missed. It had been Melissa's idea for me to visit Janet. "You need rest, Mom," she'd said sweetly. "You've been looking so tired lately. Why don't you go spend some time with your sister? David and I will handle everything here." I'd been grateful. I'd thought she was being kind, finally warming up to me after 3 years of subtle coldness. I'd thought wrong. I need to go back further. To help you understand how I ended up here, locked out of my own home by my own family. I raised David alone after my husband Robert died of a heart attack when our son was only 12. Those were hard years, scraping by on Robert's small life insurance policy and my job as a school secretary. But I gave David everything I had, every penny, every ounce of love, every sacrifice a mother could make. I worked double shifts so he could go to college. I sold Robert's truck so he could have a down payment on his first apartment. I gave and gave and gave because that's what mothers do. When he brought Melissa home 5 years ago, I was overjoyed. Finally, someone to make my boy happy. Someone to give him the family I'd always wanted him to have. She was polished, educated, working in finance at some downtown firm. David was proud of her, and I was proud of him for finding someone so accomplished. The wedding was beautiful. I paid for most of it, draining the last of my savings, but seeing David happy was worth every penny. "You'll always have a home with us, Mom," he'd promised at the reception, hugging me tight. "We'll take care of you now." I'd cried happy tears, believing every word. But things changed, slowly. So slowly, I didn't notice until the poison had already spread through everything. Little comments at first. Mom, maybe you shouldn't rearrange the living room. It's hard on your back. Mom, we'll handle the bills now. You just rest. Mom, you're so old-fashioned. Let us manage things. I'd thought she was being helpful. I didn't realize she was taking control, piece by piece, until there was nothing left for me to hold on to. The final piece fell into place 6 months ago when Melissa convinced me to let her manage the household finances. You shouldn't have to worry about all this paperwork at your age, she'd said. I work in finance. Let me handle it. David had nodded along, distracted by his phone. I'd agreed, relieved to have one less responsibility. I gave her access to the accounts, the bills, everything. Another mistake in a long line of mistakes I hadn't known I was making when I'd left for Janet's house the week before. Melissa had insisted on driving me to the bus station herself. You have a wonderful time, Mom, she'd said, helping me with my bag. Don't worry about anything here. We'll take care of everything. The way she'd emphasized everything should have been a warning, but I was just happy she was being nice. Now I understood. She'd needed me gone, needed me out of the house so she could do whatever she'd done to steal it from under me. I sat down on the porch step, the cold concrete seeping through my thin coat. November wind cut across the lawn, scattering leaves over my scattered belongings. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called David. Straight to voicemail. I called again, voicemail, 3 more times, each one going unanswered. My own son wouldn't even pick up the phone. Neighbors started appearing in their windows. Mrs. Chen from next door, peeking through her curtains. The Martinez family across the street, their teenage son standing openly in the yard, staring, but no one came out. No one asked if I needed help. They just watched, and their silence felt like judgment. Hours passed, the sun climbed higher, then started its descent. I sat on that porch step, too shocked to cry anymore, too broken to know what to do next. Finally, as the afternoon shadows grew long, I did the only thing I could think of. I called the police. I need help, I told the dispatcher, my voice cracking. I've been locked out of my home. My daughter-in-law changed the locks and won't let me in. This is my house. I've lived here for 40 years. The dispatcher's voice was professional, kind. Ma'am, we'll send an officer right away. Stay where you are. I waited, touching my phone, feeling more alone than I'd felt since Robert died. I didn't want to cause trouble. I'd never been the type to make a scene or involve authorities, but I had nowhere else to go. No money for a hotel, no family except the son who wouldn't answer my calls. I just wanted my home back. Was that too much to ask? 20 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up to the curb. I stood, smoothing down my coat, embarrassed and desperate and terrified all at once. The officer's door opened, and a tall figure stepped out, reaching up to remove his sunglasses. My breath caught in my throat. No, it couldn't be Matthew. The name came out as a whisper. The officer froze, his eyes meeting mine. Recognition dawned across his face, followed by shock, then something that looked like pain. Mrs. Thompson, is that you? I couldn't speak, could only nod as tears started flowing again. Matthew Rodriguez, the boy from next door, the one whose mother had gotten sick with cancer when he was 16, the boy I'd fed dinner to almost every night for 2 years while his mother was in treatment and his father worked double shifts to pay medical bills, the boy I'd helped with homework at my kitchen table, who'd cried on my shoulder when his mother died, who'd worn Robert's watch to his high school graduation because I'd given it to him and told him my husband would have been proud. Oh my God, Matthew breathed, and in 3 long strides he'd crossed the lawn and pulled me into a hug. Mrs. Thompson, what happened? Why are you out here? And just like that, standing in the arms of this boy I'd helped raise, I broke down completely. The story poured out between sobs: the trip to Janet's, coming home to find my furniture on the lawn, Melissa's cold dismissal, the changed locks, David not answering. Matthew held me steady, his hand on my shoulder, his face darkening with anger as he listened. Stay right here, he said firmly when I'd finished. Don't move. I'm going to sort this out. He walked up to my front door, and knocked with the confident authority of someone used to being obeyed. I watched from the sidewalk, my heart in my throat. Melissa opened the door, and her smug expression faltered when she saw the uniform. Officer, is there a problem? Ma'am, I need to see your proof of ownership for this property, Matthew said, his voice professional but cold. Mrs. Thompson claims this is her home, and she's been illegally locked out. That's ridiculous, Melissa said. but I could hear the nervousness creeping into her voice. She's confused. This house belongs to my husband and me. She signed it over before she left town. Then you'll have no problem showing me the legal transfer documents. Melissa disappeared inside, returning moments later with a folder. Matthew took it, flipping through the papers with careful attention. I watched his jaw tighten, watched him pull out his phone and take photos of the documents. Wait here, he told Melissa, and returned to his patrol car. I heard him on the radio, requesting backup and running some kind of check. 10 minutes passed. 15. Melissa stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her confidence visibly cracking. Matthew emerged from the car and walked back to the house. And now his expression was granite. Ma'am, these documents are fraudulent. The transfer date doesn't match the notary stamp. The signature doesn't match Mrs. Thompson's signature on file with the county clerk. And most importantly, this property was never legally transferred according to public records. The deed is still in Mrs. Thompson's name. That's impossible, Melissa said, but her voice had gone shrill. I have the paperwork right there. You have forged paperwork, and I need you to step outside now. You can't do this. I live here. My husband. Where is your husband? Matthew asked. David Thompson. As if summoned by his name, David's truck turned onto our street. He pulled into the driveway, nearly hitting the pile of furniture, and jumped out with his phone in his hand. What the hell is going on here? Melissa, why are the cops? He stopped when he saw me standing on the sidewalk. Mom, what are you doing here? What am I doing here? The question was so absurd, I almost laughed. This is my house, David, my home. What are you doing here? He had the decency to look away, guilt flashing across his face before hardening into defensiveness. This is ridiculous. Officer, my mother is confused. She signed the house over to us before she left town. We have documentation, fraudulent documentation, Matthew interrupted, that uses what appears to be a signature from old power of attorney forms. Forms that, by the way, became invalid when Robert Thompson died 15 years ago. I felt the ground shift under me. The forms, the blank business papers David had asked me to sign months ago. The ones he said he needed for tax purposes or loan applications, or something I hadn't fully understood. He'd used them. My own son had used my signature to steal my home. David, I whispered, and he finally looked at me. How could you? You never gave me anything. He exploded. And suddenly, we weren't talking about houses anymore. You kept everything for yourself. This house should have been mine when Dad died. You should have sold it and helped me get started. Instead, you made me work for everything while you lived here alone in this big house like some kind of, I gave you everything. The words ripped out of me. I worked myself to the bone to put you through college. I sold your father's truck so you could have a down payment on your first place. I paid for your wedding. I gave you every penny I had, and it was never enough. You always wanted more. Well, now I have it, he said coldly, and there's nothing you can do about it. But he was wrong, because Matthew had already radioed for backup, and another patrol car was pulling up, because the documents were fake and the law was clear, because sometimes, just sometimes, justice actually shows up when you need it most. David Thompson, Melissa Thompson, you're both under arrest for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit theft, Matthew said, pulling out his handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. The next few hours were a blur. Melissa screaming about lawyers and mistakes, David silent and pale as they put him in the back of the patrol car, neighbors finally emerging from their houses, whispering and staring, Matthew gently guiding me to sit down, bringing me water, calling someone from the county clerk's office to come verify the property records in person. By sunset, it was official. The house was mine, had always been mine. The fraudulent documents were evidence now, seized as part of the criminal investigation. Matthew helped me change the locks, back new locks, ones only I had keys to. Then he started carrying my furniture back inside, piece by piece, treating each item with care like it mattered. Mrs. Chen came over with a casserole, apologizing for not coming out sooner. I didn't know what was happening, she said, and I could see the truth in her eyes. She'd suspected something was wrong but hadn't wanted to get involved. I couldn't blame her. I'd probably have done the same. When everything was back inside and the house looked almost normal again, Matthew sat with me at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with algebra homework 20 years ago. He'd grown into a good man, this boy I'd fed and cared for. Looking at him now in his uniform, confident and kind, I felt something shift in my chest. Not all the seeds I'd planted had grown into thorns. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with exhaustion and gratitude. Matthew, If you hadn't been the one to come, don't, he interrupted gently. Mrs. Thompson, you saved my life when I was a kid. My mom was dying, my dad was barely home, and I was drowning. You fed me, you tutored me, you came to my graduation when my own father couldn't get off work. You gave me my first real watch. He touched his wrist where a different watch now sat. You treated me like family when I had none. You were family, I said simply. And you still are. He pulled a card from his wallet and placed it on the table. This is my personal number. You call me anytime, for anything. I mean it. I check on you once a week minimum, and that's non-negotiable. You're not alone in this, Mrs. Thompson. Not anymore. The tears came again, but these were different. Not grief, or shock, or betrayal. These were tears of relief, of gratitude, of the overwhelming knowledge that kindness remembered had saved me when blood had failed me. In the days that followed, I learned the full extent of what David and Melissa had planned. They'd been accumulating debt, gambling on cryptocurrency investments that had tanked. They'd needed money fast, and selling my house had seemed like the easy solution. They'd forged the transfer documents using old signatures from those forms I'd signed, betting I'd be too old and confused to fight back effectively. They'd planned to put me in a cheap apartment somewhere and pocket the difference. They'd underestimated two things: the paper trail that proves everything in the end, and the boy next door who'd grown up to be a police sergeant. David and Melissa faced charges. The legal process was long and painful. My lawyer told me I could pursue a civil case as well, sue for damages and emotional distress. I thought about it for a long time, sitting in the living room where Robert and I had raised our son, where we'd celebrated birthdays and Christmases, and ordinary Tuesday evenings that had felt like nothing special, but now seemed precious beyond measure. In the end, I let the criminal charges stand but didn't pursue anything further, not because they deserved mercy, but because I needed peace. I needed to let go of the son I'd thought I had and accept the reality of who he'd become. That was its own kind of grief, harder in some ways than losing Robert, because at least death is honest. Betrayal wears the mask of love until the moment it strikes. Matthew kept his promise. He stopped by every Wednesday evening, sometimes in uniform, sometimes in civilian clothes. We'd have dinner together, and he'd check the locks, fix little things around the house, just sit and talk. He brought his girlfriend once, a lovely woman named Sarah who worked as a nurse. They held hands across my kitchen table, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope, not for myself, but for them, for the good people who still existed in the world. Months passed. Winter came and went. I turned 73 in the spring, and Matthew threw me a small party, inviting neighbors who'd become friends again, cautiously re-entering my life after the scandal. Mrs. Chen brought her famous dumplings. The Martinez family came with their son, who apologized for standing and staring that awful day. I didn't know what to do, he admitted. I was scared. I forgave him. Fear makes cowards of us all sometimes. David wrote me a letter from jail. I didn't open it for 2 weeks. When I finally did, late one night when I couldn't sleep, it was 3 pages of excuses and half apologies and blame. He was sorry I felt hurt. He'd been under pressure. Melissa had pushed him into it, on, never quite saying the words that mattered. I was wrong. I hurt you. I'm sorry. I wrote back once, a single page. I told him I forgave him, because holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting him to die. But I also told him the truth. Forgiveness didn't mean trust, and trust once broken wasn't easily repaired. I didn't know if we'd ever have a relationship again. That was up to him, to the person he chose to become. After all this, I hoped he'd find his way to being someone better. But I wouldn't be waiting by the phone. I mailed the letter and felt something release in my chest. Not peace exactly, but the possibility of it someday. Now, sitting here in my living room as summer sun streams through the windows, I think about everything that happened, how close I came to losing everything, how betrayal can wear the face of your own child, how kindness planted years ago can bloom at exactly the moment you need it most. I look at the photo on my mantle, Robert's smile frozen in time, and I talk to him sometimes like I always have. You were right, I tell him. Family doesn't always mean blood. Sometimes it means the boy next door who remembers you feeding him pot roast on Wednesdays. People ask me sometimes if I'm lonely, living in this big house by myself. The truth is, I'm not alone. Matthew still comes by every week. Mrs. Chen and I have coffee every Saturday morning. I volunteer at the library on Tuesdays, teaching older adults how to use computers. My life is smaller than it once was, but it's mine. Every lock, every door, every corner of this house belongs to me, and no one can take that away again. I learned something important through all of this. Kindness is never wasted. Even when it seems to disappear into ungrateful soil, you never know when it might bloom again. When some seed you planted years ago might grow into exactly what you need to survive. They changed my locks, thinking they'd locked me out of my life. But life has a way of unlocking the truth one good heart at a time. And sometimes the family you make is stronger than the family you're born with. Sometimes the boy you fed pot roast to becomes the man who saves your home. Sometimes betrayal teaches you who deserves your trust. And kindness comes back when you least expect it but need it most. I'm still here, still standing, still home, and that's enough.